All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, that's Mobile APIs and Frameworks, in the summer 2024 semester at Georgian, and it's week 3, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. And in this part, we were connecting to our cluster last time. I'm just going to go back to what we had before. So on the Mac, let's go back there. And what I did on the break was I just shifted to a free tier. That's what I did. So I created a cluster 0. And that's why it didn't allow me to, I should have figured it out. When it doesn't allow me to create cluster 0s because it has to be unique. So what I have is with cluster 0, what it does is it gives me the access to create whatever I want. Now, I want to create a database. That's what I want to create. So one thing is to create a cluster, but there is nothing else to create. If I click on Browse Collections for my cluster, you can see that there's no collection. And in fact, I want to add my own data. That's what it actually says for me to do, right? So this is the next step. I want to click Add My Own Data. Now, one thing before we go there is I'm just going to kind of skip out here. I want to show you that online, inside of your Blackboard, I've given you some sample data, okay? And I've got an XLS file that I've got here as an example, and a few things here. And just want to see if I have all that locally. I may not. I do. So here it is. So what I've done online is I've given you these 3 files. So one of them is an Excel file. Let's take a look at that Excel file together. So my Excel file, right? My Excel file is where I started making my movie database. So if you are someone who does not have a movie database, here's where I made mine. Does yours look like this on Excel? You should, right? I gave this stuff to Shivali when she was doing the mobile data management stuff, so maybe she used the same files, and you guys have this, right? So, which is good. I have 10 movies here that I've added in here with some description. Your movies should be as very similar to this. You need to add 20. Each of you have to have 20 for your assignment 1. Okay. Again, this is an individual assignment. You'll be marked on, not together. Notice I have writers, actors, and directors, and genre, and these things are what looks like an array. So I have an array of genre, an array of director, an array of writers, an array of actors. Okay, that's what these things are. And then my year and my length and all that stuff. So this is kind of information about the movie that we're creating for today, right? Movie list. So how do I convert this into something that I can use? Well, I've also given you another link. Let's go back to looking online here. I've given you a link that does CSV to JSON. Okay, so there's a CSV to JSON link. So if you had a CSV file, right, you can upload your CSV file and convert it to JSON data over here on the right side. Okay, that's what I've given you, right? So you can certainly do that. I've already done this step where I've converted my JSON file, and it looks like this. So here's my JSON file. I'm going to drag and drop my movies.json into my project and put it up on GitHub for you so you can see it. So again, how do I do this? Well, this right now is on my PC, and this is on my Mac, right? Bad, right? But I have it somewhere else. So if I go to OneDrive, I might have my stuff on OneDrive. Whereas here, if I go to Documents and Courses, so OneDrive or some kind of Google Drive or something could be helpful. If you have it, it helps me out, that's for sure. And under Lessons, I may have those files. So I only need movie.json, so I'm going to kind of save that. So I'm going to download that and put that inside the right spot. Am I looking at the wrong thing? This, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Oh, sorry. I meant to do that here inside my Mac. Let's try that again. Because it has to be done on the Mac because I want to download it from my Mac. I already have it on Windows. So again, there we go. One more time. Okay. And here it is. So we're just going to download this. And it's going to pull up, where do I want it? I can certainly put it on downloads, right? I'm okay with that. Let's put it there for now. And then under downloads, let's open up another folder. There's downloads. There's movies.json right here, and then there's my in-class exercise 3. Remember, I can do this in the operating system too. I have to just download or copy this one, movies.json, and copy it into in-class exercise 3. Right, there it is, or move it. I just moved it there. Wonderful. And what this allows me to do is, if I go to my Visual Studio Code, you can see now I have my movies.json here. And this is what it looks like. So what I did was I made it so that each of the movies has an array of genre, an array of directors, an array of writers, and an array of actors. This is different than you may have done with Chevalier. I don't know if she did it this way. Okay? So this is going to be a little bit more complex, and this is what I want you to do. Right? So this is where it's a little different. Because, okay, so I want to get an array of stuff going on. How do I do that? And that's kind of, you got to think about this for a second, what the process is for getting this. But this is my data. How do I take this now and put this up on MongoDB Atlas? There are some ways, right, that you guys know how to do. We can do it manually. So we can do it manually. We can say add my own data, right? And we have to add the database name. The database name is going to be the name of the database, not the collection. So we're going to call this the media database, okay? Maybe we're going to have movies. Maybe we're going to have books. Maybe we're going to have other kinds of media, right? Here, we only have one thing we care about, which is the movies, the movie collection. Here's the movie collection, right? So media and movie. We can call this movies because there's more than one, right, if we want to. And additional preferences, do we have any? Is it a capped collection? Is it a time series collection? Is it a clustered index collection? The answer is none of those. So we don't have to care about those things. We're going to click create. And then what it's going to ask us for is, well, what does your data look like for movies? So your media database, movies collection, but we don't have any documents. So let's add a document. Let's insert a document. All right, so you might look at this and you can see that there is an ID here that it's giving us, and then some blanks. We can certainly try that, or we can choose these curly braces, right? So that is something we can add in. So is there a quick way that you know of, right, that I can add it in? Like, could I add in, do I have to add in this ID? Is it required? You know, do I have to do it this way? Is there another way of doing it? What are your thoughts? So remember, ID is one thing. That's my ID. And we have a collection of data. The collection of data is going to be something that looks like this. So there's my ID, and now we need my other data. So we're going to have a comma here, right? And we're going to have some other ID. Now it tells us there's an error. If there's an error, it's going to say there's an error down here, right? So what about if I went back to my data here, and I want to add in all of this? Now movie ID is not your ID. It's just something that's important for us as developers. Maybe my movie ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Maybe it's a catalog number or whatever. It's nothing to do with the ID from the database. These are different things. Okay, so I'm going to kind of grab all this and I'm going to copy it and see if can I paste it back inside of MongoDB. Does that allow me to do that? So paste it in there. Try that again. And it kind of allows me to put it in here. And if I have a problem, if I click insert, it'll tell me there's a problem. It'll say I can't do it, right? But here it did it. And it actually gave me a genre array. It's an array of 3 items: action, adventure, and fantasy for Star Wars, right? It gave me an array of directors, but there's only one director in this case, Irvin Kershner, right? And an array of writers, an array of actors. Those are the things that we have here, okay? This is wonderful. This is good. And this is all we need, just one piece of data. I just want to read one piece of data right now, right? Because that's the thing. So now we've added in our first piece of data. Now we can start thinking about what our model class is going to look like. So again, we try and model our model class after this. We have a model that we want to use for movies, And we have a complex model, right? We're not using a simple model because we have all this, genre, directors, and writers, and so on. So let's think about how that is going to look, as an example, compared with, maybe what we've done in the past, maybe what you've done with Chevalier or whoever, right? So let's try that out. So what I want to do is start thinking about our model class, our movie model, and what that is going to look like, okay? Because that's the first thing we want to do. Let's try this out. So first things first, we want a connection. Let's connect to our database first, all right? Let's see if we can do that, right? So in our server, we have a config. I want to add a new file, and this new file is going to be a db.ts file, okay? That's what we're going to do. So just gonna add that in, new file, db.ts. This is our information for how to connect. So that's something that we want to use as well, okay? My db.ts file is going to have the following: some kind of remote URI. So I want to say let here, let, remember we're going to use let or const, okay? Let remote URI, right? And that's going to equal to your connection string, right? But we know we're going to use .env, right? So how does that work, right? We actually have examples of the environment, that environment variable we're going to use, but that we're going to have some kind of connection string we're going to put here. I'm just going to put this in here for now, right? And then what we're going to do is lay down here, we're going to export this. We're going to say export default, and what we're going to do with the default is we're going to export something called remote URI, and the remote URI is going to be remote URI. This is what this is going to be, right? So remote URI, we're going to export this, and we're going to import this inside of our configuration. So here in app.ts, in here, we're going to connect to MongoDB Atlas, and we're going to do that with our remote URI, okay? So what we want to do is we want to import Mongoose here. We want to import Mongoose. So here under .env, we're going to do all that stuff. We're going to say that here we're going to import Mongoose and related modules. Okay, we only have one, so we're going to say import Mongoose from Mongoose. This is correct. I'm also going to import DB, right, from DB. Now notice this ./DB because it's looking inside the same folder, config, because app.ts is actually in the config folder. It just has to go to DB right here. So that's DB. And then we're going to use Mongoose for the first time. And Mongoose looks like this. So Mongoose, hey Mongoose, I want to connect. I'm going to use my db.remote URI. That's what I'm going to do to connect, okay? Okay, so that's what I need, remote URI. And then I'm going to listen. So here's my DB connection events that we're going to listen to. One of them is mongoose.connection. You can see that it's already doing .on. When I'm connected to MongoDB, then what do I want to do? What do I want to do? I want to do something, right? Where I'm going to do maybe a console.log. You know, I can say something like connected to, instead of Mongoose connected to, I can say connected to whatever that remote URI is. Okay, again, we don't know what it is, and it's obfuscated here, right? So we can have that. How about when we disconnect or whatever? We can actually put a connection string here for disconnection too. I'm not going to do that, right? So this is our connection event. So that's what we've created right now. So first, again, the process is we import Mongoose, then we import the DB. We just made that DB file. That's here. We don't really have a connection string here yet. We will. We'll get it, and I'll show you how that looks. And then after that, once we imported it, we're going to use the connection, the db.remote URI, to connect to Mongo. That's what we're going to do. How do we get that? Well, we got that, for those people who don't know, we get that from here, right? So if I go back to overview, you know, or sorry, for the database itself, here's databases. You can see that there is connect, right? So connect, if I click onto it, there are some things. We can use Compass if we want to. We can use a shell. We can use MongoDB for VS Code. There's lots of stuff we can do here, right? So let's try a couple things. Let's try MongoDB for VS Code. And it gives us this connection string, right? So it gives us the cluster and all this kind of stuff, plus Thomas and the user and the password. Remember the password? We saved it, right? So let's kind of use that. Copy it. And I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code. And now, inside of our .env file, .env, I'm going to put in something that's memorable for us. Like, for example, our Mongo, or, you know, something like MongoDB Atlas connection, or something like that makes sense. And it's going to be something like, you know, Mongo URI. I like that. And then we'll put in that code. That's our code there. And then the cluster is important, or the database. Our database is called media, right? That's important. Remember we talked about this. The password is this. I just saved it, so I'm going to cut that out there and put it in here. All right? And that is our connection string. But we need to use it. We haven't used it right now. This is inside of the .env file, right? That's what it is, the .env file. And I want to use this Mongo URI inside my db.ts file. So how does this look? Well, we can get hints on how this looks by looking at this, where we can use process.env. Whatever that looks like, right? Process.env. And this, right? Let's see if that works. So if I go to db.ts, and if I say something like in here, right? Process.env. And then I want to use Mongo URI, Mongo _ URI, then that is my thing. That's how I do it. So now you can see it's not shown here anymore, right? I get this process.environment. That's what it is. Mongo URI comes from here, right? This is where it comes from. And it replaces that with all of this. It's a macro. That's what it is, right? And then if I go back to this, we have an error. It says, well, argument of type string or undefined is not assignable to parameter of type string. Why am I getting this? Why am I getting this? Because remote URI can be either string or undefined. It can be both, right? I could fix this by casting this as a string. I could say as string, right? I could do that, and that fixes the problem. We're saying whatever we get, cast it as a string. Okay, that's the way we can do it. We can also do it, if you don't like this, we can also do this. What if we cast it as a string in our database? We don't have to show it here. What if I went to db.ts, and when I let this process and do whatever, I can surround this with brackets. I can do one of these. And I can say as string. How about if I did that? And now remote URI, if we hover over, is a string, which means that, if I save it, which means that if I go back to my app.ts, now we have no more errors because remote URI is being viewed as a string. Either way is good. Okay? That's how you fix that problem. And why? Because we're using the .env file. Okay, that's the connection string. So this is good. I like it. And we can test it even if we're not doing any operations. We can just test it right now. And the way to test this is we can use nodemon. Let's see if it works. So if I go nodemon, connect with me, and then it says connected. Okay, now we don't want to show all this, right? That's crazy. We don't want to show all this stuff to people, right, when we're connecting, because that's exactly what we don't want to show, right? So let's Control C, but we did connect. This is a good thing. We did connect. So let's try it again, and that's inside of our app.ts. In our app.ts, we have that thing that tells us how we're connecting. We have this, right, which is we say that when we're connected, log it out. So we're not going to do this. We're going to say connected to, we're going to put in MongoDB Atlas. That's it. We're not going to say what we're connected to. We're just going to say we're connected. That's all we care about anyway, right? So let's try that again. So again, clear, and then node mon. And if we're connected, we're good to go. Are you with me? So this proves that we're all good. We're connected to the cluster. If you don't get this, something's wrong. Here are the things that can be wrong. You put the wrong IP address. You put some weird IP address that you're connecting from, right? You're using the wrong username and password. Or you're not connecting specifically to a database. You just put in the connection string without putting in this part, media. This is important. So check those things, all right? Otherwise, you won't get this, and it'll never connect, okay? So this is the first part. This is great. We've done our configuration for connectivity. Let's Control C out of here, right? So, sorry. And let's put this up on GitHub. So git commit -m, and we'll say configured app to connect to MongoDB Atlas. Git push. If there's any problems, our dependabot is going to come along and tell us there's a problem. Are you with me? Is this all the same? You guys have, I think so far, for the most part, you guys should be the same, yeah? Except for maybe that .env thing, which you've never done before. I want you guys to do .env for in-class exercise 3, all right? So, because we're going to put it up there, and we're going to use our process, think about them as server variables. That's what they are. So we can hide the sensitive data in our server. We're not going to do that this week, but next week we're going to connect to render, and we're going to put our API on render.com, and we're going to use that same server variable on render. Okay? Wonderful. So now that we've got that first done, let's get the next part done, which is adding in our model. All right, so model. Here's our movie model. Let's think about what that movie model should look like. Let's think about this. Now, remember, we have a pattern that we can use, right? So good thing is that our lovely people at Mongoose have supplied a pattern for how we can connect to it. So let's try that out first. So what that means is, if I go here, and if I go to here, here's an example of, did we connect? Yes, we did connect. I killed all my dependent pod alerts. We're going to go back to that. This is actually our project, our in-class exercise 3. You can see we configured app to connect to MongoDB is the last push I did. That's the way I just did that now. And what I want to do is I want it to go to Mongoose TypeScript. All right, so that's this. And the first thing they talk about is when you create your schema for TypeScript, do this, make an interface. Okay, make an interface. So remember what an interface is in C# and in Java. What is it? What's an interface? Guys, what's it for? Come on, you guys should know this. OOP 101, right? What is an interface? How about the guys online? You smart people. What is an interface? Oh boy, no one wants to talk today. Well, let's think about this. We have classes, right? Here's another question for you guys. Let's see if I can help you out. Can we use multiple inheritance ever in C#, Java, JavaScript, or any modern language other than C++? C++, the answer is no. But can we do it with, sorry, C++, the answer is yes. But can we do it in any other modern language? Multiple inheritance. I want to inherit from 2 classes. Can I do that? The answer is no. I can't do that, ever, right? And the problem is because of this thing called the deadly diamond. If I could inherit from 2, it's not a problem. It's C#, Java, and Kotlin, and Swift, and all those languages. They don't want to support multiple inheritance because, 100% because of this, it's not type safe, right? And here's the problem. Imagine if I have 2 superclasses, a parent A and parent B, okay? And both of them have the same method name, method A, and they're both called method A, all right? Which one do I inherit from? Parent A or parent B? It's the same method name. Which one do I inherit from? The answer is your compiler doesn't know, right? And so most times we want to avoid this problem, and it can happen by accident, by the way, not by design. And so we want to avoid this problem, and to do that, most modern languages will not support multiple inheritance, okay, except for C++. But C++ is a separate case because when you're using C++, they expect you guys to know, right? C++, I always say to my students, is like flying a plane. Instead of using a steering wheel or some kind of rudder, right? You're not using a rudder, you're using switches. Okay, I'm going to move to the right, let's switch all these things. Okay, I move to the left, let's switch all these things. I'm going to go up, let's switch these things. I'm going to go down, let's switch them back down this way. And that's not how we fly a plane. We fly a plane by having some kind of control, or whatever, and maybe some pedals for the flaps and so on. I don't know if you ever flew a plane. I didn't fly a plane, but I've seen it done in the movies, right? You kind of have some kind of rudder, and we, as human beings, like it simple like that, right? We don't want to know the underlying guts of how the plane flies. And for most of us, when we're programming, because we're not necessarily an engine programmer or a language programmer necessarily, we use the language to do whatever we're going to do. We don't do that low-level stuff. The language takes care of the memory management. The language takes care of a lot of things for us, right? So we don't use that. Same here in TypeScript. TypeScript does not support multiple inheritance. But what we do is we use something called interfaces. And interfaces allows us to create a contract between the class that implements the interface, right, and the interface itself. The contract basically says, if I've used the interface, if I implement the interface, that my class has to be compliant with the interface. It has to add in whatever the interface tells you. In TypeScript, it's a little different. TypeScript allows you to create interfaces for for data, like data types. Okay, so this interface is basically iUser in this example, and it's talking about 3 properties. The properties have no values right now. And name, email, and avatar are just the shape of what we want this thing to look like. And what interfaces help us out in TypeScript is it's type definitions. We're creating a type definition for the type of model that we want here in for our class, right? So let's try this out. So I want to make an interface. What kind of interface is it going to look like for us? Well, let's start off with our import statement. So here in the model class, this is the first thing we're going to do. We're going to say import. Let's do this together. And I'm going to import 2 things. I want to do a collection. I want to get the collection. I want to get the schema. And I want to also look at the model. And I want to get all these things from Mongoose. So these are individual things from Mongoose. Instead of importing Mongoose from Mongoose, I'm importing only some things, right? Next, what I want to do is I want to create a movie interface, right? And what this defines is the structures of a movie document. That's what it does. And what we want is something that's a little bit more complex than what is showing here. So we're going to say interface, and we're going to use iMovie. I stands for interface, and the name of the type is going to be here. And what we want to put in here is some stuff. So we know that movie ID is something that we have, which is a string. We know that title, by the way, these are all lowercase, just like normal. Title is something else, which is a string. We also know that studio is something that we want to get. So movie, title, studio. Now let's take a look at other things we had for our movies. And remember, we have our movies.json here as an example. Movies.json. So movie ID, title, studio, genre, which is an array, director, and writers. Genre, directors, writers, and actors, they're all arrays of strings. Let's see if we can do that. So how would that look then? Well, as you would expect, genre, which is a string array, right? Directors, right? Directors, which is a string array, right? Writers, string array, actors, right? String array. And then what else do we have? We have year and length. They could be numbers, short description, MPA rating, and critics rating. Let's see if I can put those in. right? So again, we have year, which is a number, right? We can put a year in there. Now notice I'm not using date. I'm not using date. The reason I'm not using date is because I don't want to calculate the time between when the year, if I want to tell you how old the movie is, maybe I'd use date. You know what I'm saying? I'm not using date here. I'm just using it as a number. Length, maybe as a number. Short description, that's definitely a string, right? And what else would there be? MPA rating, I think is what we called it, which is a string. And the MPA rating is like, is it restricted? Is it for children? Is it like, what is your rating for the film? And then the critics rating, which is a number, all right? That's what we want. So that is your interface for iMovie. Now, a couple things. If we want all of our things to look like this, maybe in a future lesson, we can export this interface and use it in other places, or maybe even have this interface have its own file, right? Because we're putting an interface, which could be its own file here, and it could be completely on its own. So how does this look when we're trying to read data? Well, now we want to make the movie schema. Okay, here's the movie schema. And so how does this look? We're going to say let movies schema equal to a new schema of type iMovie. Okay, so this is where we're going to have type, and what we can do is, we can put in the proper brackets. Kind of looks like this. And for the first part, we want to say the movie ID. Now, Copilot is giving me all the answers here. Take a look, right? Copilot's giving me the answers. This is kind of how it looks, right? But we have a bit of an issue, right? And the issue comes from this type of array. This is actually wrong. Copilot got this wrong, right? It actually doesn't look like this, right? So type is string. We can definitely do something. Let me undo this and do it manually. So I'm going to undo, and let's try this again. So movie ID, we know one at a time, is, we can do it the easy way, which is capital S string. We know that that's the only type we care about. Title is a string, right? We know studio is a string. This is good. Genre is a string array. Now this is correct, okay? And directors, also a string array. Writers, string array. Actors, string array, right? Year is a number with a capital N. All these are capitals now. Length is a number. Short description is a string, capital S. And you can see that MPA rating is also a string. And then finally, our critics rating is a number. Now this is the proper way of doing it. Notice that was the long way that I showed you earlier with curly braces and the type. You can certainly do that as well. And we may do that as well. For example, if we think that there's certain things that are really super important, we can classify them as required, right? Right now, we're not going to do that. So there's my movie schema. Movie schema defines a new movie. Think about this as the model of the movie itself. Okay, that's what it does. So if I hover over a movie schema, you can see that, two things. It is a schema, right? And it implements iMovie, which is this part, right? And that's why when we did this, it was important to use this because it informed us that something was wrong. That's why TypeScript is great, right? Next, now that we have this, we can say that let movie, that's like the movie model, right, equal to a new model of type movie that we're going to use, we're going to label as movie, and then we're finally going to export default movie. And this is going to be our first movie model. Questions around this? So again, two parts. One part is your interface. The other part is your schema. We're not exporting the interface right now, okay? But we may do it later, okay? And the interface tells us the shape of our new data type, which is iMovie, right? And think about this as the class, if you will, or Sometimes I think about this as like a struct in other languages, where basically this is just a information about our data type. That's all it is, right? And this can help us in other files too, right? Okay, that's awesome. So we did this part. Let's put this up on GitHub. So again, we're going to say git add dot. There we go. Git commit -m. We'll say added movie model. That's what we did. Okay, movie model's been added. Yay, awesome. Well, now that we have our movie model, right, we need to test it. We need to make a controller for how we can read from our database. So remember that the router itself, this part, is only routes. That's all this does, right? And what we want to do is we want to make it so that the controller, when we make our movie controller, the controller is going to have series of functions that we're going to export that are going to be things that we can use to display our stuff. Okay, that's what we're going to use to make it work. So again, up here, let's start coding for our controller. We're going to import a couple things here. I want to import the things we need. We need a request object, the response object, and I like this from Express. I don't need that. Undo. I need the request, like I said, the response, and the next function from Express. Next function, I'm going to do that. Why is it giving me that? Next function from, it's doing too much for me now. From Express, there we go. That's what I want. All right, so response, request, response, and next function, we need those things because Express is the Express framework, and request and response and next function are going to help us define our function a little bit that we're going to make. Okay. I also need to import movie from the movie model. Okay, because without importing the ing, and so what we're doing is we're saying, hey, go to the movies folder. That's what this is, movies folder. Look inside the movie thing, the model folder. Look inside the movie model, and then we want to export movie. And notice what it says. It says movie is a model of type iMovie that also inherits from document. That's what it does. Awesome. Okay, great. Next, I want to read or display my movie in something that looks like JSON data. All right, so next part. So I want to say something like I want to export a function. We're going to call this display movie list. Like it's trying to fill in the details for me. I don't want this. I want the request object. I want the request object to be of type request. I want the response object to be of type response. And I want the next object to be of type next function. This thing is going to return void, that's correct. And I want to do the following. By the way, that was wrong. This thing that is showing here is actually wrong. This is not ChatGPT, this is Copilot, and Copilot is wrong. And that's what I'm telling you guys. Sometimes you might use Copilot or ChatGPT and you're going to use the latest version of Mongoose, like what this is, and that is from an older version of Mongoose. It doesn't work. Let's do the new version. The new version doesn't look like this. It goes movie.find, and what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in an empty object because we're not filtering. We're finding everything. And then I'm going to have a then statement. Okay? Then what I want to do is I want to return a function. Let's do this. Call it an anonymous function, which is going to pass data out as an example. And the anonymous function is going to respond. We're going to say if we're good, we're going to say that the res.status, right, is 200. We're going to return 200, and we're going to pass out JSON data, but the data is going to be brushed out like this. First, we're going to return a success object, right, which is going to say true. So success is true. We're going to say, right, and then we're going to say a little message, which is something like, my movie list retrieved, and displayed. Okay, that's what we're going to say. And then afterwards, we're going to access our data, which is going to be the data that's going to come from the database. That's what it's going to look like. Okay? And we don't need this part. We need this to be open. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. This closes up this function. That's what this does here. And then what about if we have an error? If we have an error, we want to do a catch. Okay? And we can do a function again for the catch. Here's the error. If we get an error, what does that look like? Well, if we get an error, we can do a console.error. And we want to take that error and we want to return it. And the reason why this is having a problem is because we have an extra thing like this. That's how it should look. That's our display movie list. So let's go through it and talk about how this works and where I got all this stuff from, right? By the way, I'd like you to start documenting things. Right now, in your in-class exercises, I haven't asked you to do that, but this is what it might look like. You can use something, there's an extension you can download called Document This, all right, which is kind of cool. If you look at Document This extension, I've already included it. Here's Document This. What Document This looks like is like JavaDoc, okay? If you guys have done JavaDoc before, very simple. It's really great because it allows us to create quick documentation for things that we're doing, right? So back to this. We don't need to look at this anymore. So we can do a, we can use this by going kind of a double double asterisk. We can go and select Document This. And when I do that, it actually documents the thing. It just basically says, look, here's an export. We're going to request is a request type object. Response is of type response. And next is of type next function. And we're going to say something like this function displays the movie list in JSON format, which is what it does. Okay? That's what this thing does. Let's go through this again. So display movie list is the function. I'm exporting it. We need to use the export keyword. The export keyword exports that function to whoever is importing it. That's the first thing. Next, I have three objects, the request, the response, and next. I'm not using the request object, but I am modifying the response object. The response object is what's going to have my data, right? So I'm going to say, hey, response, I'm going to tell that the response is 200, and I'm going to return JSON, not rendering. I'm not rendering anything. I'm returning JSON. And then I create an object that I'm returning. This is the object here that I'm returning right here. Right? I've decided to do this. You don't have to do this. You can just return data. But here I'm giving you more than just data. I'm giving you a whole object. I'm making it this way for two reasons. One, I want to make it a little hard. I do. I want you to think about how I'm going to retrieve this data in Android or in iOS or something else. It's not just JSON data anymore. I'm going to make a very specific way of reading this thing when we do it together for iOS and Android. All right, that's number one. Then, if everything goes well, right, that's good. But how about if everything goes bad? If I can't read something, if the database is down or something else happens, I want to have an error that's displayed. Okay, that's what I want. So that is your display movie list method. It's the first method that allows us to read. And this will satisfy your assignment 1, not even your in-class exercise 3. This is pretty much what you need for assignment 1. Okay, I'm telling you what it is. Okay, which is great. So let's try it out. So we're going to say save, right? And now this is in TypeScript. Again, remember that this is the important part. It must be in TypeScript. Your assignment 1 has to be in TypeScript. Here's an example. All right, and that's great. Request, response, and next. We're good. But now we need to use this inside of our routes. Okay, so we have our controller. How do we use it in our route, right? So the way this works is if I go to routes, right now we have this, right? But what we want to do is we have Express and this kind of stuff, but I also want to import from my controllers the thing that I got, right? So I'm going to say import, and then instead of from controllers, we want to import this specific thing, which is the display movie list, right? From my controllers folder, from my movie controller. That's what that is. So I'm getting the display movie list, which is basically the function. Notice now that I've documented it, the documentation comes up here. I can see what this is. It says displays the movie list in JSON format. It tells me what this thing does, right? Awesome. So then what I want to do is, when I want to get my movie list, then instead of this part, I'm going to do something like display movie data, movie list, and I'm going to pass in the request, response, and next object. And that's it. I know I'm going to have more than one endpoint, right? This isn't getting the home page. This is getting the movie list. That's what this does. This is getting the movie list. And I can put this on one line so it looks like this. Okay? I can put this on one line. It kind of looks like this. This is the one route. This is a list of routes, right? So list of routes, right? We only have one. Or we can also call them endpoints. Endpoints, okay? That's what they are. And then we only have one endpoint, which is this one, save. And let's save the controllers. Save. You gotta save everything, right? And remember, we're transpiling, so we can see that what it looks like when we transpile. This is what it looks like when we transpile, right? This is what the router looks like when we transpile, right here, right? So we've transpiled, okay? One thing that I don't like about what we did with the controllers is we added the word function. Is there not a way of changing this from function to some kind of arrow function? And the answer is yes, we can do it differently. We can just take this away, and we can use an arrow function here instead, which looks like this, right? Same thing here. We don't need the function keyword because we're not doing anything. We could just use an arrow function that looks like this, right? So that's a simple way of doing that. Save, right? We do need the function keyword here because we are creating a named function called display movie list. Okay, that's what we're doing here. Okay, now for some testing. Let's test this out. All right, so first, let's run the code again. So back to this, right? And let's do this, and let's do nodemon, and hey, look at that. We're connected to the Atlas. Now, we need to use localhost. Let's try this localhost thing. So again, I'm going to run localhost 3000. This is still the same, right? Let's try this out, localhost 3000, and oh, we got a problem. Let's fix this problem. It says no default engine was specified. Well, of course it's going to run like this. Why? Because we don't need localhost 3000. We need localhost 3000/API. If I do this, we get this. And now we can see that we got our movies. Are you with me? I know it looks like a lot of steps for people who haven't done it before. You guys have done some of this before. So it shouldn't be that odd what I'm doing. Let's test it now with our Postman. So back to Postman. How do you test this thing off with Postman? I want to do a GET request with Postman. We logged into Postman, and I'm literally going to put in localhost here, localhost 3000, right, /API. And if I click send, then we're going to get, if it's good, it says when testing the API locally, you need to use the Postman desktop agent. You currently have a different agent selected, which can't send requests to the local host. And this is why it's important to do this. Look at this Postman agent right here, right? So here's my Postman agent. Okay. And it's going to log me in like we did before. And by the way, I highly recommend, you use Postman. I think it's a really great thing to do. I think what it allows us to do is have a lot of control over our things that we have here. So let's try this again. So let's try localhost. Let's make sure we're in the right thing. We're in the wrong workspace. Let's try MDEV1024. There it is. And let's make a brand new request. Here's our request. And the request is going to be localhost 3000/API is what we want to do. And we can put it in there. We can say, just put that in there. And then we see this. Look at that. And what it does is, by default, it gives us a very nice way of looking at our data. Okay? Now, the other reason why we need Postman is next week when we get together, we're going to finish off CRUD. We just did read. We created our first movie object online directly by using, by going into the database itself and adding the data in there, right? But next week we're going to do it programmatically. We're actually going to do Postman. We're going to make Postman work like it's a form, and we're going to add in the form data and see what the problems can be. And that's mostly what I wanted to show you today. That is your in-class exercise 3. I want to see this, that you've connected to Postman. I want you to show me Postman. I will put all the details for in-class exercise 3 inside of your in-class exercise 3 instructions. Please look there later today. But for the most part, here's what they're going to be. Restructure your app like the way we've done it, right? Use .env, all right? That's what we talked about. Use .env. Import mongoose.env and express session. We haven't used express session yet. We'll use it next week, or sorry, 2 weeks from now. You know, connect to MongoDB. That means making a brand new MongoDB database and a brand new server, right? So in other words, if you had one from before and you had stuff up there, I want you to make a new one, all right? It's okay if you have the data. You can always port the data from one place to the other, all right? But for this week, your MongoDB connection has to be new, right? And so it can't be someone else's. It can't point to like Shivali's, you know, data class that she did, all right? It's got to be your own for us, for our class. This way you don't mess with any data that you did for before, and this way I can mess with the data with you as much as I want, okay? Remember that you always have my stuff as an example, right? So whenever you have a problem, whenever you say, oh, I couldn't do it, take a look at my code. My code, compare my code to your code, but don't just copy my code. Some people I know are tempted just to say, well, Tom did it. Let's just copy his code and put that on GitHub. Yeah, okay, you could do that, but that's not going to be the thing. The thing for you to do is try it out, make it work. Because here's the reason, guys. Exam time comes, right? And then I'm going to ask you to do some stuff, you know, maybe in class or maybe, you know, that week or whatever. You have a time limit for how to do stuff. And copy and pasting might not be possible because I'm going to say, I want you to do this. And notice, like, even when I looked some stuff up with ChatGPT, it was wrong. Or Copilot was wrong. It was wrong. It gives the wrong code, right? So, yes, I'm going to give you lots of examples. That's what I'm going to do, all right? But that's something that we're going to continue to work on. And I want you guys to practice because when it comes to the exam time, I don't want you to go, Tom, I ran out of time. It can happen because you know, there's so much to do. And if I give you a template to start with, a piece of starter code, you might be doing something like, now I got to do something completely different, you know, for Tom. Tom asked us to do A and I got to do B. Wow, there's a lot of stuff to do here. You might run out of time if you've not practiced. So please practice. That's what the in-class exercises are for. Every week it's practice. Go through the stuff, understand how the things are structured. If you have questions, this is the time to be with me and ask me those questions. You can also book time with me online, but ask me the questions here. Now we're going to have some problems. I'll tell you right now. We're going to have a whole pile of problems when we import this into iOS or Android. And the problems are going to be two things, right? One, I'm not just giving you back data. Take a look. I'm giving you an object that includes success, a property, a message, and then data. And the data is going to be an array of data. And right now you only have one piece, one element in that array. Okay? So, and that array is going to be an array of objects, right? For the most part. So there is lots of stuff to decompress here, right? And put this inside of your iOS or Android app. How do I read this in? There's many ways of doing it, right? But we're going to be talking about how to do that with your API directly, okay? For Android, it's quite complex. For iOS, it's quite complex to do it properly. And you're going to see that the code is not the most beautiful code, okay? Remember, when we do some in-class exercise going forward, I might ask you to do something like this. Here, I've given you the Android app. Now you do the iOS app. I've given you the iOS app. Now do the Android app. I know it's a lot, but remember, it's worth 4% of your final grade, so it's worthy. All these things right now, these are freebies. Last week was easy. The week before was easy. This week is easy. But as we go forward, it becomes more and more challenging, and so it ramps. And this is where I can justify the first weeks. These are easy weeks to get your 4 out of 4. and all that kind of stuff. Some people didn't get 4 out of 4 last week anyway. They did these other weird things, right? Or they forgot to do something, or they didn't do everything that I asked. Remember, take a look at that instruction document. The instruction document tells you what I want. And remember, always remember, people say it to me, I gave you the video, you know, but you gave it to me in MP4 format. That's not what I asked. I want you to do YouTube videos. A link to YouTube. If you give me something else, I don't care what it is, 0. All right, please make sure. It's so simple. I'm not trying to be difficult here. I just want what I want, which is a YouTube link. Okay, so please make sure you have that. Okay, one more thing. So now that we have this, let's put this up on GitHub, right? So make sure that we have this. We've added in our stuff. We made sure that we're getting connections and everything else. You can see that we've got a bit of a problem too. Look at this. It says at first we got a problem, right? And the reason why we got this problem is because we got a 404. We got a 404, and it says no default engine was specified. But remember, we're not going to look at this thing with the web, right? We're not looking at this thing with the web. We're looking at this thing with some kind of application. The application is going to look at our framework, our /app, right, as an example. And that's why we're getting that error. What I tried to do when I looked at it from localhost here, let me just close this off. When I went to localhost and I went to, with no API, I just went like this, I'm not giving it the right thing. That's why there is no site. Well, this right now, we're not running this right now, right? Anyway, we're not running anything right now. But let me just run that one more time. Right? So the reason why it's giving us this error is because I don't know what you're talking about. That's what this is saying, right? It's spitting out a problem. Now, question for you guys. Should we really spit out this problem? Think about it. Should I spit out this problem to, to the user who's going to use my API? The answer is no. We shouldn't do this. This is a lot of information. It's telling the user a lot about my desktop, a lot about me, actually. This is for you. This is for your troubleshooting, all right? Later on, we're going to remove this, right? Because we're just going to say something like 404, maybe you meant to go here, API, right, as an example, and redirect the user back to what they're doing. We can do that with the server, remember, right? Because the server, right, the reason why, how it's working right now, just to tell you why I'm getting that error, is it's going to, think about what it's doing, right? It's going to my server.ts. My server.ts is created a server environment. That's what it's done, right? So here's the server that we have, my server.ts. And then, see, look at this var. These should be lets. And you guys let those things stay there. Instead of being lets, we left it as var. That's also bad. There we go. And like we said, no vars. So we have this as an example. That's why, by the way, people copy pasted this. That's why it looked exactly the same when you submitted it back to me. So this is great. We're listening on the server, and that's fantastic. And then what we did was, once we listen to the server, we have this error. What happens on error? It says on error, right? Which says console error. We're going to output the error to the console, right, as an example, whatever that error is. If the error code is e-access, right, that's a specific error code. It's going to output this, and it's going to say process.exit1, process.exit1. This is what this does on this side if there's an error. And this is like a server error, something wrong with the server, okay? But if there's no server error, it's going to go to our app, our configuration, which is here. So that's where this goes to. It goes here. And then it starts importing stuff, right? It's going to import stuff, until it gets to down here if there's an error. So here's an error handler. Look what it does. In the error handler, it says, well, okay, I'm going to give my res status, right? And then I'm going to output res render the error. I can't res render anything anymore. I can't do this anymore, right? Because if I try and res render an error, right, there is no view engine, like we said, right? So how do I fix this problem, guys? Like, I don't have to fix it really right now, but how do I fix it? Because there is no view engine. right? I can't do this anymore, right? If I try and do this, and I try and, kind of app use this error thing, right? Where I want to output the error. How do I output the error anywhere? How do I do this? I could do a res send, right? I could say that. I could say res send, right? Right? Or res end. How about that? Res end. I could do that, where we're ending with an error. Let's try that. What happens there if we did this? So I'm going to save this, and let's see what happens if I'm still running, I'm still connected, and if I go back here and I refresh, then I get error. Yay, way better, right? I don't show anything to the user, right? And I can give them whatever I want. Maybe you meant /API, right? So I can give them that back too. I can go back here to, to this and give them an actual error instead of like, oh, it's an error. I can say something like really simple, and we can be more fancy than this. I mean, far more fancy than this. I can give them a static page, a 404 page, not found. I can serve a static page to them, which we make fancy, make really nice looking. And that nice fancy page says, oops, you've encountered an error. You've gone to the wrong spot, whatever. Or I can also respond with an error that's basically going to say success fail, message, this kind of thing. And so what happens is then when your Android app sees that error, right? Like if let's say someone puts in the wrong URI, instead of putting /API, they put something else, then Android, the error that's coming from the server should be descriptive enough that the Android, your Android application should say, okay, I got this error. Oh yeah, I forgot, my path is wrong, right? So for now, we can do is something like this. We can say error, please use, /API as a prefix, as a root prefix, or as a root prefix for your endpoints. Or I like that, API requests. API requests, sure, I like that. See, it's correcting me, and that's where I like what it does. So ChatGPT and Copilot, great at writing things like your cover letter, right? Really great, right? Not always great with code. All right, so now this is good. Let's try this out again. So if I go back to this, and if I refresh, then it's going to say error, please use /API as a root prefix for your API request, which reminds us to do this, right? And now we can get our data. Get our data, right? Which is what we want. Okay, this is great. Now, finally, let's put this up on GitHub. That fixes our problem. So again, git commit -m, and we'll say added first API endpoint. Okay, and then git push. And that's it for today, guys. I'm going to stop recording now. Any questions for the people that are here online or anything? Pretty simple, I think, for in-class exercise 3. I think if you follow along, you know how to do this. I'm looking for at least one piece of data for those people who have your entire movie list. If you have time to put it up, I think it's going to help you with assignment 1. Put up all your movie lists into that new database, right? If you have 20 movies, put them up, right? And then next week we'll add a couple more functions. We'll add another read function where we can specify the movie by ID. We can specify the movie by different things. And we'll also add in create, update, and delete. All right, we'll add those things. We'll finish off CRUD next week. And if we have time, we'll put it inside of a app. We'll start thinking about making an Android app or iOS app, right, to see what it's going to start looking like, okay? All right, guys, that's it for me. Thank you so much. I'll stop recording, and I'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, you guys you have enough